I haven't given the link to anyone. No, we'll record it. We'll record it. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have the Wi-Fi code?
Actually, I don't. I did not register yet. Hey, does anyone who got the thing have a Wi-Fi code for like how do we connect to Wi-Fi? The movie on Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi
Yes.
Okay.
For the code, it's like
Mobicon. Okay.
So you go to Hilton Honors meeting.
Yeah, that's what. That's it.
Okay, it works. Okay.
Movie
Thank you.
2024.
Yeah, look at the app.
And see, they do the licenses.
No, that's good. That's good. Figure the immersive computing people did not hear us.
Can't I get rid of this? Yeah.
It's over there. There it goes.
Yeah, but it's because anything like the overlay is weird.
Okay, let's go and do this. Let's go.
Yes.
Let's get rid of that. And let's get rid of that. Okay. Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's great. So we'll start in maybe a couple more minutes. So like people enjoy.
While we're waiting, I'm Dan. Hi. But while we're waiting, if you, I'm going to try a little bit interactive. So you go to this site, menti.com, and you can just scan that with your QR code. I have a little poll of asking, do you personally use this video system sometime? We have a couple questions that are more interesting. You either scan or just go to Menti and get that code. Like you personally, do you have a like JPAN has a Starlink Mini? Okay. They don't have to just the researchers. Is that not? Sure. Just trying to make a simple question. I realize I'm in the wrong place. Okay. Let's see. And we can whoop, nope, not that. Let's go and let's see. 1 yes, 10 no's. There we go.
And I think people just did not understand the question about the research part.
I know.
Because everyone for me,
I was about to simple question. Do you use a Leo system or not?
If you would have asked, spinning, you would have.
I guess the question is like for internet access, so that makes it confusing because
Yeah.
access we use for research.
This is true. Okay. And whoops. Just...
Even for research, my students do I do.
We actually have two different systems. Space things.
Oh, thanks.
That's all has something practical to one web stuff.
Oh, dear, you want to swap.
Yeah, no, we don't own one web, but we have access.
Okay, that's
Cool.
So that's what we can compare, right? They have different design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey everyone, we can get started. It's my pleasure to have Dan here today for today's keynote. Dan is a senior advisor for the Internet Society, and he's been active online since the 1980s. He is a speaker, author, communicator, and storyteller who writes and speaks about disruptive technologies. He's done a lot of, produced a lot of work in that space, including multiple podcasts that are quite popular, books, blogs. He's contributed to or written at least 6 books, the last I checked, about different aspects of the internet. Fun fact, Dan also recently celebrated his 20th anniversary as a Wikipedian. He's been editing Wikipedia for 20 years now. We're very excited to have Dan here today, and I'll let Dan take over and talk more about your satellites.
Thanks. Yeah, what's back in help. So I started back, with Wikipedia back when it was nothing. You just went there and you edited pages and stuff. And for the first 16 years, I maybe made a couple edits a year or something like that. And then came the pandemic, and we all had our own different ways of coping, right? In different ways. My coping was that every night I went live on Twitch and streamed Wikipedia editing. Okay, just to be geeky. So all of a sudden I was doing, hundreds and many all sorts of things. So I want to talk a bit about LEOs. You already did that. And I want to just talk about somewhere in this continent, a little bit north, a village called Ulahuktuk in the Northwest Territories. It's in the Arctic region. They had terrible internet access. They just had it through a geostationary provider. It was very slow. It wasn't reliable. All of this. They went and they created a community network, community-based network in some form, and they used a low Earth orbit satellite for backhaul. And suddenly, the folks there were now able to do the things that we all do. They were able to stream movies. They were able to go and do online education. They could connect. They could sell their products. They could interact. They could do all of that kind of thing that was there from one of these kind of systems. Right now, just this past little bit here in the southern part of the United States, we've had hurricanes Helene and Milton, which have wiped out a large amount of connectivity throughout the southeastern US. And this is a group called the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center that goes down and they set up charging stations, Wi-Fi access, and doing all this. And they're doing it through, in this case, Starlink. They're setting up this kind of thing, bringing in this kind of connectivity and resilience. Anybody similarly in North Carolina trying to reconnect people, there's another effort called Connect Carolina, which is using OneWeb in this case, or Eutelsat OneWeb to be accurate. But again, in all of these cases, when you talk to people about what this kind of connectivity has brought, we hear about it being truly life-changing in some way. It has really made, a serious difference in how people live. I work for the Internet Society. We are a 30-year-old nonprofit based actually here in Reston, Virginia, in the DC area. We have an ultimate vision that the internet is for everyone. And the work we do is based around this. And over the next 5 years, our focus is on how people everywhere can have, access to affordable, reliable, and resilient internet. That's really one of our big focuses. And then, of course, also that people can have a safe online experience in some way. This is the work we do. We do it around the world. It's there. Any of you are welcome to join. Anybody, remember, you can be. It's internet-society.org. You join there, be part of our groups and all of that. So those low Earth orbit satellites obviously are of interest to us because of that ability to go and have this access anywhere in some form. 2 years ago, I was involved leading a team that wrote a document around perspectives on low Earth orbit satellites. And one of our things going into that was to look and say, how good are these for the open internet? Good, yay, or what do we got? The answer we found, of course, was that we don't know. It's so new. It's so many different things are in play, many of which you all have been researching. And I'm excited to hear your papers as the rest of the things go on. So we wrote this paper. You can read it. You can look at it. It's up there. And 2 years later, a lot has changed. How many satellites does SpaceX have up in space for Starlink? Do they know off the top?
6,000.
6,000, 10,000?
Let's solve that.
Actual answer, 7,324 as of yesterday. Well, no, actually, this is wrong because they launched 20 more yesterday. So, okay, 7,344. Okay. 7,344 Starlink satellites up there. That's amazing. More than we've ever had in the history of the Earth. Satellites up there for one company providing internet access. And that's just Starlink satellites, not all the other satellites they've launched and everything else. Some of the fascinating things, right? We've seen this working. I've seen some of your papers around this, that inter-satellite laser links work. They're being used. They're doing all this in ways that we just had never thought of in the past. The terminals are changing. I mean, look, this is amazing, right? J-Pan just took this and brought it in his backpack and carried it wherever he wanted to go. He's got power brick right here. Okay. Oh, that one there. Okay, this power brick. And here we go. Take this and this, and you've got internet access anywhere in the world that Starlink hasn't turned on. That's pretty darn amazing that we can get to this level of connectivity all at once. Now, I didn't know I was going to have a problem, so I included a slide. Oh no, it's coming up. But the oh, by the way, these are the Amazon Project Kuiper. Their view of it. You can see OneWeb. There's a bunch of other players looking at doing these different kinds of things. One little detail: all of these are separate proprietary systems. You can't use one with the other and everything else. So when we talk about challenges, you think about proprietary lock-in, e-waste. J-Pan decides he wants to go to something else, that terminal goes, in the dump or whatever else. Roaming, this is a huge thing. People can take that and go anywhere. Like I said, I didn't know I had a prop, so I thought I'd thrown up this thing. You could be this gentleman here with the rugged Starlink. There's some folks who are taking this, they're plugging it with a bunch of batteries and putting it into a container that you can just pick up and carry along with you. And immediately you've got that kind of connectivity. The people who are involved in off-grid access and camping, the preppers and folks who are looking at all sorts of kinds of things are loving that, because you can take it wherever and you can do whatever you want with it. They're mounting it on cars, mounting it everywhere. It's just truly an amazing kind of thing. We've also seen a revolutionary in-flight connectivity. How many of you, when you flew here, used internet on the plane? Okay. Was it good internet or was it no? Okay. It was good. Okay.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Well, all of them are looking at this, right? They're all looking at moving toward LEOs in some way. And some of them have longer contracts and such, but this, of course, is terrorizing the people like Viasat, Hughes Network, the others who have operated in-flight connectivity for so many years from geostationary based satellites. Huge process here. You're also seeing new economic models. The affordability is tough on these when it's costing, $600, $700 sometimes for the large dish. And this is 300, I think, is some of that, right?
Right now it's 500 units.
Oh, 500 US. Okay, so it's 500. That's right. It's 500 in that. So, it's a lot some places, but you're seeing some models. People can rent the kits. They can do other different kinds of things that people are using in some ways. So there's a lot happening in this space. We're seeing a whole lot around the resilience. This was earlier this just a couple months ago as we had these hurricanes. You can see down here, they had prepared hundreds of Starlinks to deploy into the area. We saw that again, I mentioned before, the ITDRC folks who are out there with their trailers to go and provide this kind of connectivity. People were flying in kits from all around. We're also seeing again, tremendous use in how do we go and connect the unconnected in various different parts. This was the state of Maine up northern here, who is going to go and buy all these dishes and give them to people to go and use all across the state, which is very rural, very wooded. I'm excited to hear the paper that somebody was talking about later today about direct-to-dial. This is fundamentally changing so much about telecommunications, because all of a sudden we're able to just take our normal everyday cell phone and start to use it. We're having it, right? We've had it with Apple, with Google, with the ability to do emergency. Now we're getting to where we can start to do texting. It's only a matter of time. The Starlink satellites that went out yesterday is actually this morning. It was like It's technically today, it was like, a few minutes after midnight or something like that, launched out of California. It included 13 of those included the radios necessary to do direct to device communication. So Starlink is already seeding their constellation with the satellites they need to go and do this, to be able to provide this. And of course, Starlink has its relationship with T-Mobile, which means that everybody else is trying to find other people to partner. And so AT&T and Verizon here in the United States are the other big players. They're working with other people. There's another company called AST Space Mobile. Some of them are looking at how they come in, in very low Earth orbit now we're seeing. So we're starting to look at this. One company has already turned it on out in some Pacific Islands, in Kiribati and the Solomon Islands. Lake Global has worked with Vodafone in that area to go and turn on this direct capability onto their satellites in those kind of areas. We're also seeing China, come into this play. If you've looked at the fact that they've now started to launch, they've done 2 launches, 18 satellites each for their 1,000 sails constellation, which is one of the 2 different constellations that they're on record as being launching that will have the same size as what Starlink is talking about. So amazing things that are happening out inside of here. So I'm going to do, the reason I had you do that thing at the beginning, if you would go to this, the same Menti, that slide that you were at before, and I have to do one thing here. Let me get to, fail on the, let me go over here. Let's do this. So this, I need to go and, all right, we had a little bit of a fail. So let's bring us back over. Here we go. I need to go and, I just push the button to have it go to the next one. There we go. What's the biggest challenge for LEO-based internet providers? If you go to that code, which was here. What's your one word for what's the biggest challenges you're seeing for getting started, getting internet space access lower orbit? Just have to enter in a word. Let's see. There we go. We're seeing some answers in here. Regulations, reliability, launches, coverage, latency. All of those are great ones. I'm going to argue that I think somebody had it in there. The single biggest issue right now for people is losing my mouse.
It's on there.
Oh, it's over there.
Yes.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Getting there. Right? The single biggest problem that we have at the moment is getting satellites up there in your SpaceX. If you're SpaceX, everything's awesome. If you're anybody else, it's the biggest challenge you have at the moment is getting your satellites up into space. Right? Amazon went out a couple years back, locked up 85 launches across everybody except SpaceX. One of the largest contracts in the history of ever for launch capacity. How many of those have flown? 0. Because SpaceX is the only one launching consistently right now. You've got some providers, you've got some other folks doing that. Obviously, Russia's out for Western folks. So if you look at it, so far in 2024, this actually is wrong. It should now say 112 because of the one that happened at 12:43 this morning. Excuse me for not updating my slides, but 112 launches in 2024. The Ariane 6 has gone once, didn't carry a payload. ULA's Vulcan Centaur went once, didn't carry a payload. Okay. 111, 112 launches this year. Astounding on the low. If you look for next year, they're forecasting 150 plus. Arianespace said about they're forecasting 9, but they pushed their second launch into 2025. So I don't know what that will do to their schedule and forecast. ULA claims they'll do 20 to 25, but they've got to get their next launch off. They've only done their one launch of the Centaur. Blue Origin, which is another player there, don't know. We don't know what's going exactly with them. And SpaceX tomorrow is going to do the 6th launch of their Starship rocket, which when they get it going, will carry literally hundreds of satellites. I saw one estimate of around 250 at one point. It would go up in a single rocket launch. With that, we're going to bring the Starlink V2 satellites, which will have more capacity and more performance, all that, and also bring more cargo for everyone else. So we're going to be seeing an incredible amount of movement in that space. This was just in over the weekend, a company called AST Space Mobile, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. They are planning to launch to bring more of their satellites up. They're going to start actually with India. India's ISRO, their space agency, does commercial launches down then. They're launching their first satellite there and hoping to use Blue Origin. But again, Blue Origin has to be launching in some kind of way. That's going, and then they've got 2 SpaceX just to go as well. So a lot of things happen in launch. Just getting the satellites up there is the biggest challenge. As we just mentioned this. Some of the others, I'm curious, there was a paper, I think today, talked about capacity as far as resilience. We talk about resilience. We talk about how these are amazingly powerful, but do they have the capacity? You know, when you think about the terabits per second and stuff, like you go down the subsea cables and stuff, what kind of capacity can you get coming out of these LEO networks? Not a lot at the moment, but as we continue to watch the launching of more and more that's going on here, we'll see how that goes. We're also seeing a lot in the space, and this is where the internet stuff, where we've been watching stuff in the spectrum wars, in the space that goes on. The geo providers, the long-time companies, there's a thing called equivalent power flux density. Anybody guess a couple nods, where basically at the equator, the LEOs have to power down a little bit to not provide interference. There's a whole fight around going on at this within the ITU space around this. GEOs, of course, think it's necessary. LEOs say it's not. The GEOs, of course, like LEOs to go away because they're eating their business model. So you have all of this happening. You have the telcos on the ground, especially here in the United States. They've been arguing we need more spectrum for 5G. Okay, and we want to grab some out of these bands that happen to be the ones that the satellites use. Okay, we need those bands for better, connectivity for our systems. How much of that is real versus how much of that is defensive to try to get rid of the LEO providers? Again, we don't know. And the GEOs, of course, are trying to do everything they can. If you look at the FCC filings here in the United States, the regulatory filings, every time SpaceX files, you immediately have Dish, Viasat, all of the other providers filing with a zillion reasons why it's terrible and it should not be allowed. This is the political game that's going on around this. How many people are familiar with the ITUR? Okay. So it's the radio communications sector of the International Telecommunications Union. They're the ones who dictate the policies around spectrum. And, one of the other barriers to getting one of these systems set up and going is that you have to go around to every single country and get permission from the spectrum regulator in that country to do your downlink and your uplink. You have to get the permission to use those frequencies, which is why you see OneWeb has its satellites up there in space configuration. They haven't done as much promoting it, partly because they haven't gotten enough of those, and they apparently don't have enough ground stations and some other aspects and things around them. But they have to go around to every single one of those. The ITUR is where a lot of that gets decided. They had the World Radio Conference in Dubai in 2023. There'll be another one in 4 years. This space, the LEO space, which in that world, it's called NGSO for non-geostationary. So it's the NGSOs. That is fiercely being debated. And again, you've got this turf war going on, these pieces with the geo providers and the telcos wanting to make sure that the LEO providers are pushed out and all of this kind of stuff going on. LEO providers wanting more, all sorts of things happen that way. I'm not going to read this, you don't need to read this, but I'll tell you that the most recent WTSA, the World Telecommunications Standardization Assembly, that the ITU telecommunication side had, there was a strong effort to try to get the ITU the telecom area involved with satellites. Because they would like to be involved too, because it's always been radio people get to deal with the spectrum, but the ITT would like to get involved in standardizing and in doing some stuff around that. So there's this kind of, at the UN global standards level, there's this kind of things that are happening in space. We've also talked about people looking at using LEOs to get access during internet shutdowns and blockages. We were talking earlier about Iran and about how it is currently turned on. Starlink has been turned on over Iran. So if you have a dish inside of Iran, you could be able to go and get Starlink access. A little detail later. But I mean, in Iran doesn't have a lot of friends internationally, right? So if SpaceX turns it on over there, there's not necessarily people who are going to be super upset, right? And also, as somebody was pointing out, SpaceX, Elon Musk does not have a lot of business interests in Iran, so there's no real reason to care, whatever. But you would see that it won't be turned on over other places. And this becomes one of these things about sovereignty and where you go with that. The other part about risk of using those is they're not passive. So if you're in Iran and you're using a Starlink dish, you're sending out signals which can then be found by signal intelligence agencies and people like that. So there is a very strong risk associated with that. You can do that. If you see pictures of the Ukrainian army using their Starlink dishes, you'll see they typically put them a good distance away from where the soldiers actually are, and they run long cables. So that if those are detected by missiles or whatever else, they're hitting the dish and not the people. Those kind of things are there. And then the other big topic, of course, is space debris. Right, we're seeing this with so many different systems and satellites that are going up there. I don't know how many people are aware of the zero debris charter that came out a little bit ago, but this is something where organizations, companies, governments have been signed up to say that we will not, we will do all we can to reduce our debris. But we also talked about, and let me ask you a question. If LEO satellites have a lifespan of about 5 years before they have to be deorbited and they burn up in the upper atmosphere. And if we get about 50, 60,000 of them, how many of that burn up every day? Yes. 30? 5, 10. By some calculations, by the time you get to the state 5 years out where you're replacing all that, you're talking probably 50 to 60 satellites burning up every single day in the upper atmosphere. Do we know what that will do? There's some studies that were talking about the oxidation of the aluminum, the other different pieces, how it can be affecting the upper atmosphere. Do we know, is that okay? We've had a lot of cases in our history where we're like, oh, just put it all in the ocean. We don't care about it. It'll be fine. It's big ocean, all that. We had similar things with chlorofluorocarbons, all these different pieces that we said, oh, let's go and do this. It'll be okay. We don't know. Great research, Eric. We're looking for something around that area. How many astronomers here? Any astronomers? People doing astronomy? Okay, no. Astronomers are really not happy. Okay. Astronomers in the world are really not happy because you're having all of these that are going on. If you've seen these trains, anybody see the Starlink train go overhead? Isn't it kind of cool? It's kind of cool for me. I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, look at this. Because they all go overhead. If you get a chance to see it, there's sites that help you find it. It's kind of neat because when they first launched, they put them up there, they put them in a train of whatever, the 20, 30 satellites that go up. And they do the configuration testing, they do all that kind of stuff, and then they go and they boost them to their appropriate orbit shells. But in the meantime, it's you're standing there and you see this whole line of dots going across the sky for 5 minutes. Well, if you're an astronomer, it's kind of not cool, right? So another one is this one. I actually tried to look at this. So to visualize the space, I'm here, a gentleman over there, okay? And actually, the rest of this room. Imagine a satellite this big. And this isn't even, I think it might even get a little bit bigger because I think when I test it's about 13 meters. These ASP satellites are going to be 15 meters square kind of thing. Okay, they're going to go into lower orbit and possibly even lower to go and provide direct-to-device connectivity. They're that one I mentioned before, that signed up a bunch of people to go and sign. Okay, these are going to be huge. All right, and they're going up into this orbit. And the astronomers of the world are really not going to be happy. Because these are going to be very large objects that are going to be floating across there. I'm just waiting. You know, it's only a matter of time before they contract with somebody like Nike and swoosh, right? You can see it. Billboards will come at some point in time because it's one way to defray the cost, right? Somebody on here is doing a presentation on space weather. Okay, I saw it on the account on the schedule. We don't know this. One of those questions that we don't know. What's going to happen as solar storms, as other pieces go on there? Obviously, the vendors are looking at how they harden these systems, right? And we've seen some of this. We did see a flight of Starlink satellites that got knocked out by a storm earlier this year. We don't know. And as we go and put more and more of our, if we use it more and more, and we become more and more reliant on it, what does that mean for our long-term, resilience in some kind of form? We don't know. Open question. Latency, right? If you look at these, you're down. This is from Ookla, which runs speed tests, and they had a report recently showing that you're down to around 50, high 50s, 60 milliseconds for latency, which is amazing because you can do Zoom calls, you can do voice over IP, you could do streaming, I saw somebody saying a paper on high frequency trading. Is that somebody in here? Okay. So I'd be curious to hear what you're talking about there, because those folks need like milliseconds, right? But you can do this kind of stuff. So what's the solution that people have in some of this? Anybody know? Say a little bit to Helio, right? Why keep those birds up at 500 kilometers? Let's bring them down 300 something. Never mind that the space station's up there at 400 kilometers and other stuff is up in that space, but let's bring them down. Closer to Earth we go, closer, faster. This group wants to do 1,500 satellites into very low Earth orbit. Okay, just an amazing number of that they're able to do. You're also seeing, and I'll come back to that actually a little later. You're seeing disruption throughout the space as far as in the market, as far as what's going on, because you're seeing especially smaller internet service providers just aren't able to compete. Right, you can't compete with what you can get in some of these kind of capacity areas there. You're also seeing this. I mentioned those people in Uluhaktuk in the Northwest Territories, and they have a community network that is using Starlink for backhaul to come in there to be able to work with that. Well, in some other parts of things, people are saying, well, why should I go and be involved with this when I can just get a dish, stick it in my house, and I've got connectivity? And on one level, if they can afford it and do it, maybe why not? But at a larger level, you're becoming reliant on a single player, single device. You also aren't building that local technical community of people with knowledge and experience and expertise around internet access. So there's a couple of questions around that, but you're seeing this question being asked by people that's there. We're also looking at the potential for fragmentation. Right now, if you look at the global world, we have the public internet that we all use. And then we have in China, they have their version of the internet that is, safe in their world. Okay, and has this Great Firewall of China, as we talk about it here, that is, let's look at that. It's a different model. And we've seen this being played out in terrestrial interconnections. But now you have the capacity where you might have two completely separate space-based internet services that you could go and have. And you would have one version, which is the public internet that we're all using now, and another, which is the China's version of that, which they might very well attract a good number of governments and others to go and use because of the model that they have, which is different than there's no permission-based and more restrictive and all of that. So we are seeing this at a global level and saying, well, is this good? I don't know, from an open internet perspective, we worry a bit about this because suddenly you get to a point where you could have a permission-based, surveillance-based, restricted internet. Well, not internet, the network. It's not the internet in my world. Okay, but you could have a very different space around that. There's a whole bunch more, right? Affordability, interop, I mentioned about the fact that Japan will have to throw that away if he decides to drop Starlink and go somewhere else, do something with that. You know, business model, sustainability, reliability, gateways, ground stations. We're building separate chains of infrastructure again. You know, I look at what we do, the story of the United States and mobile telecommunications, where we built 4 separate national infrastructures. Okay, we had one that was CDMA, we had GSM, we had the other protocol that I forget, the Nextel used, and we had, you know, we've had all these different infrastructures. The Europeans went with one, GSM, and did a piece like that. Much of the rest of the world also went to that as well. But we're doing the model we used here, where we're rebuilding globally, completely separate infrastructures. The OneWeb ground stations are different from the Starlink ground stations, which are different from the Project Kuiper down ground stations, which are different from that. The satellite, the terminals are all different. It's, you know, I don't know if we have any way to get around that, but that is happening. We also see a lot of concern right now about the consolidation. The 2 biggest players financially are certainly SpaceX with Starlink and also Amazon with their Project Kuiper, which they've funded, they're building, they're doing all that. They're just trying to get those satellites up into space. But once they do that, you'll see that low Earth orbit internet access is controlled primarily by SpaceX and Amazon, and ultimately Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Is that what we want from a global perspective? Some people say, sure. Some people say, yeah, no. You know, there's a lot of difference around where we go with all that. So let me ask another question. Oops. Okay. If you go there, in 5 years, how many satellites will be in lower Earth satellite? I'm just curious. Let's see who are the optimists and who are the pessimists. Exactly.
Are these active ones or also like?
How many satellites will be active? Okay, let's do that. I only had so many letters to put on the slide. Okay. How many active satellites? How much versus how much space debris will be in there? Oops. Yeah, gotta go here. So somebody's thinking we're not going to have a whole lot on there, right? Which this could happen depending on what goes on with our launch capacity that's on there. Odds are, yeah, it's going up there, and the degree to which you think it'll be the latter really depends on how much launch capacity and what else happens out there. If you look at the numbers that are going on, over the next while, you've got Starlink will be completing their 1st generation, launching their 2nd generation. And I'll come back to that in a moment. They're going for 42,000 satellites total is the plan right now. Eutelsat OneWeb has about 600 up right now in their 1st shells, looking to build out their 2nd shell and go on from there. Amazon is launching, their plan is for an initial 3,000, but then they have larger plans to go even higher. AST Space Mobile was the one with the giant satellites. They've got a whole several hundred to go out there. China has both its 1,000 sails and another constellation, both of which are going up there, which will have tens of thousands. Telesat is a group out of Canada that's looking to one that will have some polar connectivity more so than others. It also will have several hundred. The EU has been promoting their IRIS-2, which is they've been putting out proposals, getting to go and do this, to build this. Currently, it's in the EU process of moving along. I think there's a consortium now with Airbus and some others who are going to be building this at some point, but they're looking to launch that and get that up there in some form. I used to maintain a chart that was here that showed, 30,000 for this, OneWeb, phase 2, all of this, other different groups. About 90,000 satellites as of last year have been filed for launch. No, not launch. filed for, with the ITB, you can file and say, I'm going to put up X number of satellites. Then a timer kicks in where you have to go and put up 50% of those within 5 years. And then 75% and 9% within 7 years or so. So people are filing in there. But you had about 90,000 that were filed for. And then you also had a few other ones like an organization, eSpace, out of Rwanda originally, which is run by a guy who was behind OneWeb and also was involved in many of the different pieces about that. And they were filing to launch 337,000. Okay, they have an idea for a massive constellation, this kind of thing like that. So that was the year. But today, I don't know, anybody seen Jonathan McDowell's stats? Great place to go. It's planet4589.org. Planet4589.org. He maintains an excellent set of statistics about all of these different satellite constellations. As of this morning, he was showing that there are 21 planned mega constellations over 1,000, and they add up to a total of 555,000 planned satellites. Now, how many of those will actually go? Probably not that many, but there'll be a lot. You know, he's showing us right now in all the constellations, there's about 74, 65. Now, there's also a large constellations, which is 50 to 1,000. And there's almost 6,000 planned satellites in those. And this includes OneWeb that's down here because they're a smaller, on the smaller piece of there. So you're seeing a huge amount of satellite interest. You know, a huge amount of this kind of capacity is going on. Interesting part from SpaceX back in February in October, filed a motion with the FCC here in the United States, because if you're familiar, the satellite operator has to file with the regulatory agency in their country as to what they want to do for satellites. And it's actually, they're requesting spectrum allocation and orbit allocation. And they do that in their country's regulator. They requested permission to go to do their whole Generation 2 satellite network, which will get them up to ultimately around 40,000 satellites by the time it's all worked out. But it's 30,000. They were restricted to 7,500 back in 2022, but now they're petitioning to have that lifted so they can go and do this. They also, look at this, 340 to 365 kilometers. What range is that? That's that very low Earth orbit. They've actually put a few of them up there already into that orbit. So now you're coming in at 340 to 365 kilometers. You're coming in below the International Space Station, it's around 400. You're being able to go and just, why? Why are they deploying that? What do you need for high frequency trading? Low latency, right? Closer to Earth, the closer you come, the lower your latency. They're up at around 550 kilometers right now. They're doing 50 millisecond, 50 to 60 millisecond latency. Bring it down to 340, you know, that you could chase it even lower and lower. So the whole goal is get it, you know, pretty soon we're going to have them going right over our heads or something. But what happens when you bring it lower? What's the problem with that? It's drag, right? It's gonna fall out. You know, there's so much atmospheric drag that you're going to have that. You need more propellant to keep it up. You need to do all of those kind of things. So, and you've got to have more, because the closer you are, you know, you could do global coverage. How many do you need in geostationary orbit to get up? 3. If you're in the middle area, in MEO, medium Earth orbit, what are some of the constellations up there? Anybody know how many they've got?
SES, maybe.
I guess yes.
Yeah. Like 30.
Like 30, yeah, 20 to 30 satellites in that medium Earth orbit. Then you come closer. If you're OneWeb, you're out at about 1,200 kilometers. They're getting by with about 600, 650 or so satellites, giving them global coverage. Now you come down to 550 or 500 for SpaceX, and they're doing thousands. Although you could argue they don't necessarily need thousands, but they're using them to get the capacity. Now you come down to very low Earth orbit. You know, they're just in the sky for a shorter period of time. So you need more satellites to be able to go and do that kind of thing. And in this, SpaceX also requested a large expansion of the frequencies that they currently use. Part of that is because of this direct to device. Because if you're down in this very low Earth orbit, you're not much closer for latency, but you're also much closer to be able to get a device to be able to talk to that satellite that much faster. So this is the kind of the big picture of where this is all sort of going. So huge number of opportunities for research and think at all the space. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of your papers that are there. There's a lot of exciting technical stuff happening too. I know that Nintendo had a paper that was here around caching in CDNs in space. You know, if you've got these orbiting computers that are sitting up there going around the Earth and they're sitting there idle, why not put a cache on them, right? Especially, you know, just sitting up there, having them go along. Why not put a CDN cache up there so people can go, rather than going and connecting up to the device and then back down to a ground station to get to a CDN pot to get your data and have it come back to you? Why not just have the CDN node right up there? Have the data come directly right down to you that much faster, which allows you to go and do that kind of stuff. Lots of interesting stuff happening there. I think we will see, and lives will be changed if we can accept all these different trade-offs. Our papers out there at Leo's, at the Internet site are essentially Leo's if you're just listening to it, and that's what I've got for you. Any questions? Any questions or things, or?
I can start off with a question of mine.
Sure.
So a lot of this here are academics.
Yes.
You know, like Starlink is the major deployer out there. So what is the pathway for academics to cause impact to the ecosystem? So sure, we work on interesting research problems, we have interesting solutions, but how do they make it a bit?
Good luck. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the ability of any of us to influence what's actually happening is limited and will be increasingly limited. Because the reality is, if you look at where Elon Musk is right now and how much he's done to help get President Trump elected, I can expect that in the new Trump administration, all of that will be allowed, right? And I would expect that any further regulations will be released. You know, right now there's a number of different things that have been delaying some of the Starship launches because of, you know, that pesky FAA and other different kinds of things.
Yeah.
I expect that will be turned off, or, you know, allowed. So I expect we'll see a lot more. I expect we'll see SpaceX launching a lot more next while, launching stuff into there. And the other interesting aspect about SpaceX is they're doing these transporter missions where they launch other people's satellites. Any of you launched anything? Okay, a lot of universities are doing ride shares on those things. CubeSats, other different stuff. They're sucking all the oxygen out of the launch market for all the little startups and other providers who were like, oh, hey, I'll go launch your satellite up into LEO, right? And they built their entire business models around launching stuff for people in the LEO. And then comes SpaceX, who's doing amazing work, consistently launching. And then they're like, you don't need those little guys. We got a big bus. Jump on board. We'll take it up there and we'll launch it for you. So they're literally, you know, so it'd be interesting to see how much of this gets controlled. But the challenge I think we have is that there isn't a lot that we can do. One of my wishes is, if you think back to the early internet was this amazing collaboration of people from business, from universities. And so much of the early internet was built by academics at universities and people over there. I would love to see public interest, you know, LEO.
Yes.
You know, we just have to find enough universities who can pool the money together and somehow launch satellites.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks for a great presentation. Then, looking at the trade-offs you mentioned, especially in terms of sustainability, now it's great providers launching their own satellites instead of having like one infrastructure that is shared among other different carriers, for example, maybe not provided by one company that is run by many follow other interests than the society wants. Do you have any policy action for future society to lobby on that will be open network, let's say?
The challenge comes back to Deepak's question: where do you influence things? Because the powers that are there right now, pretty much the only limitations are the ITUR, the spectrum allocations, and the outer space treaty, some of the space debris pieces. You saw here in the US that the FCC under the current administration, had done something on space debris, where they had said that if you're going to go up there, you have to agree to deorbit your satellites within 5 years of the end of their life. Because unbeknownst to most of us, myself, I didn't know that there was actually no limitations. You had to like drop them out of space at 25 years after they stopped working. So they've shortened it. So it comes back to national regulators doing that kind of stuff. But our ability to influence is pretty limited. And I think in the new administration will be even more limited here in the United States. You know, and they're the ones launching. So for the folks in Europe and folks in other parts who might want to regulate something, sorry. You know, it's going to be tough to influence. But you're right, we're building different infrastructures, different systems, different devices, all of that. And
Same story we had several times, like building satellite networks, building with tidal networks.
yep. I just learned a very interesting fact today too. November 18th has a very special significance in the United States because it was on this day in 1883 when, did anybody know what happened today? What?
Alexander Graham Bell.
No. Today was the day that across the United States, they standardized from 53 different time zones and time scales to 4 time zones. Because before that, all the railroads across the country had built different infrastructures at different time zones at different things. And today, in 1883, they agreed that at 12 noon, they were going to standardize and switch to what we now have a standard time we take for granted. But but yes, we've seen this movie before and we keep doing it. But I don't know how we change it, except we keep talking about this and saying, hey, can't you guys agree? It's interesting, in the geo world, there are standards for how you communicate between the router and the antenna. So in theory, you could buy separate antennas and separate things and be able to work with them. But in the LEO world, I mean, and look, right, this is consumer, you're down to consumer hardware, right? How many people buy a new TV and throw it away? Right, or something like that. This is the same kind of thing. Buy a new dish, throw it out. Sorry. Anything else?
Yeah, just following the question like that. Before internet, we have IBM, DAC, Xerox.
Yeah.
And before, let's say we have this kind of form, let's say doing global roaming, we have different countries, different standards. So that's why I think down the road, do we have something for the space roaming? In a sense, like you have one dish, you can talk to one web, you can have landing rights in this country.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
And I would love to see it. I think the question comes in right now. First of all, you've got so much control on SpaceX in terms of getting the satellites up there and doing it. I mean, the only people launching, right, SpaceX, and then, well, China has now done a couple, some other things like that, but okay. But yeah, until we get to the point where there's more competition and more systems out there, there isn't any need to stand or any impulse to stand.
So, but again, like the Starlink does not have landing rights in Russia, in China.
Right.
China's not,
China's never done that.
that, I mean, vice versa, China has no landing rights in the US.
No, we're not going to let thousands of
Some of the
sailors.
travel from the US to the US, they need a roaming service.
Yes. But think about it technically, there is no reason why China couldn't turn on 1,000 sails over the United States. From a technical perspective, there's no reason why somebody from China couldn't come in here with one of these for 1,000 sails and be able to come in here and be able to use their network on here. Likewise, there's no technical reason why SpaceX couldn't turn it on in China, except that China. SpaceX landing rights, and also he sells a lot of cars in China. So he would not want to alienate that government. And also China's a little bit big, right, for a government. So they would protest the international bias and stuff like that. But on a technical level, there's nothing preventing that. It's entirely at legal or regulatory aspects.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I know I've heard a few some gateway like rental like with Microsoft and I think Amazon's also trying to do that, right? So if they're going to do that, they have to have kind of standardization, right? And also IT, as you have said, telecommunications started like everyone builds infrastructure, and now even in they're sharing infrastructures.
Right.
And so And just thinking, hence we start from there, right? This trend has been like this. We hope this trend is going to go like this too. So why don't we start from where this one is, so that we meet up at what point this one is.
So some people are doing that. I would be on to say, like at the ITU events, I know the folks from Amazon, for instance, with Project Kuiper, they're at those meetings. They're talking to people doing some of that. Intelsat, Inmarsat, some of the other ones, they're there as well, talking about interoperability and pieces like that. So there is interest, I think, from some of those entities to do that. But turning that interest into reality, I think, especially when you have such a large player who is doing their own thing because they can, it's a piece. You mentioned the ground stations. Apparently, from what I have read, this is one of OneWeb's problems, is that they don't have enough ground stations to be able to give global coverage. And so they have, all of these people have teams of people who just exist to go and talk to regulators in different countries. They're running around trying to open up countries and do all sorts of stuff. Amazing. But Amazon has their ground station as a service. So once they can get their satellites in orbit, they've got the ground game. They've got it all over because they've got this kind of capacity. And so, yes, in theory, these new providers that are coming on could use Amazon's infrastructure in theory to be able to interact with them in some way and work with them. But that goes into the space-based part that I personally thought super clear on.
That's like a common conversation. Is that like back to the problem?
No, it's round trip from your device.
Like from independent.
Well,
Because that's
it would depend upon your proximity to a ground station. So, but this was what you saw in there, that metric that you saw, that's 58 milliseconds. So that was Ookla does the thing where if you use the speed test app on your thing, they'll do that. And they do multi-server latency, so they're testing, so it's not just on one. They do that, but that was around, up and back, from your device. So you're down in, 50 milliseconds or less. And with VLEO, you can go, I don't know if it's 20, right? It's some number.
it's like road fast, but it's not like from New to Sydney or something.
No, but it would be up and back up to a satellite and down to a ground station. It would use some data set. I'm sorry.
The intersatellite laser satellites.
They could be. I don't know. We don't know the topologies. That's the problem. They're all a black box.
Can you maybe take one last question?
Yeah, I mean, do you see like oscillations like conversion, like
I would love it, but I right now they all seem to be doing their own thing.
Okay, so yeah, so I guess we'll wrap up the keynote here. For other questions, we will keep it for the panel. Then it's also going to be on the panel starting in 3 p.m. today. So let's give Dan another 90 seconds. Yeah, so I was supposed to do like a workshop introduction in the beginning, which I skipped because I thought like Dan's keynote will serve as that. So now we are all excited about the challenges and the opportunities of new satellites. We have 12 exciting papers today. Oh, and my name is Deepak. I forgot to say that. I'm one of the workshop chairs. Yeah. So we're going to have 12 exciting papers today. The order is a bit weird. Like initially we planned it to start with like why does anything work, but that's the last session of the day. The first session today is resilience. So we're going to focus on resilience, and colloquially we call it why will satellite networks always work, and if not, why not? So that session starts in 30 minutes from now. We have a quick 30-minute break. After that, we have 2 back-to-back sessions, then lunch, then 1 session and a panel, and then we move. So I will let you go for the break now, and then we'll meet again here in 30 minutes for the first session. Thank you.
Hi.